I'll let Ashley start and I'll introduce you. Okay, welcome. I'm Dr. Wes Hines. I'm the Nuclear Engineering Department here at the University of Tennessee. I'd like to welcome you all to our weekly colloquium series. This year, we're very fortunate to have Lisa Marshall from NC State join us to give us a presentation. Lisa is the Director of Outreach, Retention, and Engagement. She's a lecturer and academic advisor for NC State Department of Nuclear Engineering. She was a 2017 to 20 board member for the American Nuclear Society, is currently co-vice chair for the Diversity and Inclusion in ANS Committee. She was in 2021 the vice chair for the External Affairs Committee and current program chair for the Education, Training, and Workforce Development Division. So she's very engaged in the nuclear community. If you've been around the nuclear community much, you probably had a chance to meet her. She's also chair of NC State's Association of Women Faculty and serves on the Working Council for NC State's Women in Science and Engineering WISE program. She was the Education Outreach Director for the U.S. Department of Energy NNSA funded consortium for non-proliferation enabling capabilities that just wrapped up this semester. And most importantly, she's on our board of advisors for our UT Nuclear Engineering Department. So welcome, Lisa.
Thank you so much. Let me share my screen here. Come on, I saw you do it before. There we go. Can you see our lovely wolf?
Yes.
Yes, and you're hearing, everyone's hearing me okay?
I think so.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come in and present at your seminar. And I'm going to try to make it interactive, and I'm also going to try to stay within the time frame. I am also not going to talk about everything that kind of fits under educational outreach, but talk about the pieces and the approach to doing this. And it is applicable for those who are starting that or thinking about going into grad school, others who are in grad school. And then I've personally, in my opinion, what I'm going to talk about can be taken into one's career, right? Either as one is being mentored or is mentoring, or one is giving back to the institution from which they graduated. So it's a method to my madness. I'm going to kind of tell you a little bit more about my trajectory, also about college bound. What about the college engineering experience? And that's going to segue into nuclear engineering and talking a little bit about systems thinking and what that brings to the table. And kind of finishing up talking about or wrapping back to relationship building and the whole idea of being authentic, being an advocate, and then being an ally as well. And then some questions. So when I look at, let me just close, I don't need to see myself talking. Right, so when I think about and reflect on my trajectory, I am a geographer in nuclear engineering. And when you think of geography, typically I get questions of, what's the capital of such and such? What's the capital of such and such? And if you can't answer it, it's like, are you really a geographer? On the geography side, what we like to say is that we've got a map for that, right? And it's not only the physical map, but then there's also the mental map as well. So we're bringing together physical science, social sciences, the humanities, and looking at patterns and processes that are occurring. My particular area or sweet spot, because you can be on the physical geography side or the social science or human geography side, and then there's that sweet spot in between, the human environment interactions. And added on top of that, I have and bring to what I do on a regular basis, geographic information systems. So what are those trends and processes, and how then do you map them? So it is as much about environmental assessment as it is about socioeconomics of our resources. And Within that, there is a subfield or a field within the discipline known as energy geography. And that is looking at the socio-technical analysis of resources, right? In particular, my focus, as you can imagine, is nuclear. And it has expanded beyond just looking at energy, but looking at the geopolitics of nuclear. And also in my training and background is this whole idea about strategic enrollment management, SEM. And individuals talk about it as student pipeline. I like to think of it more as an ecosystem. And there's an evolution that has occurred along the way. And you can see that evolution, in that evolution, how we've gotten better at what we do, right? So in the past, it was looking at admissions. If you build it, the students will come. Then it moved more so into enrollment management, right? You build it, you finance it, and then the students will come, right? And that's partially true. It's evolved even further to this SEM or SEM. If you build it, you finance it, what they want, what the students want, then they will come, and more importantly, they will stay. And we're somewhere in between that strategic enrollment management and alignment, right? If you design, you build, you finance, you integrate, and you consistently enhance what students need, they will come, graduate, and build careers. And I always like to add that other component onto it in kind of your engagement in the sense of students going on to their professional careers and paying it forward or giving back to the institution and into the discipline itself. And kind of layered on all of that is engineering education, or nuclear engineering education. I'm kind of tired after saying all of that, but those are the moving pieces for me. When you look at SEM, or strategic enrollment management, it is not only in the university setting, and you can reflect back on how you got to this particular point, right? It was those pre-college experiences and what happens in those spaces, and then the transition to university. And the decision to pursue graduate studies must speak to motivation. So think back on some of your motivations for continuing on to graduate school. Apprehensions, right? How are they then manifested, and how then do you calm those apprehensions of moving forward? And then what kind of experiences, as you're in the midst of your career, right? What experiences do you want to have? So in that, you have this supported ecosystem. And I always like to say to students, who's on your board of directors, right? These are the individuals that are helping to speak to your personal and professional development. It's really about that life cycle of engagement that is occurring. I wanted now to talk a little, so we have those things in mind, and I wanted to look at the educational landscape. In particular, excuse me, the National Science Board is required by an NSF Act. And this comes out on a biannual basis as the science and engineering indicators. And it happens every even number of years. And the new data, or the most up-to-date sets of data, are available now for 2020. So when I talked about SEM, I talked about that pre-college space. So internationally, the United States, when you look at the 8th graders, we're somewhere ranked in the middle of advanced economies, right? For those that are submitting data points from the science and mathematic assessments. And then you'll see that Singapore is the highest scoring country, while the US math scores have improved since 1990 or so. The improvements have slowed over the past. Community colleges now play a key role in preparing Americans to enter into the workforce. So you're looking at associate's degrees and certificates, and then the transition to your first year degree. And we're seeing that more so, I would say, in the last 5-10 years, and those things are that number is increasing with that transition. Your associate degree and those courses credits being transferred over. In 2017, we had awarded 93,000 associate's degree in science and engineering fields, and another 133,000 when we're looking at S&E technologies. Now, between 2010 and 2017, there's approximately half had done some coursework at community colleges, and nearly a fifth earned their associate's degree before continuing on. Overall, when you look at 2016 as the complete data set that is under analysis, you're seeing that about 800,000 science and engineering first university degrees. And that's also including your undergraduate degree. So 28 European Union or your EU countries together produce about 1 million of these degrees, and the top 6 EU about 70%. And the top 6 EUs that they are mentioning here are France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Spain, and the United Kingdom. When you look at China, they're producing 1.7 million of these first university degrees, and that has doubled over the past 10 years. And much of that increase is coming from engineering in particular. The US awarded 40,000 of these doctoral degrees in 2016. I didn't look at masters necessarily to keep within the time frame, and then also kind of focus in on one particular degree level, right? So the combined EU countries awarded 77,000. Now, China rapidly increases, as you can see from this chart. In 2015, they awarded 34,000, looking at science and engineering doctorals. And they are predominantly in the natural sciences and engineering. Now, what we're seeing that number has surpassed the United States as the largest producer of doctoral degrees in these areas. Overall, I think it's a good thing, right? That we're seeing STEM and we're also seeing STEAM. So you have that integration of the arts, social sciences, humanities into a STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math training. And we're seeing that, and that then benefits the globe as a whole. I wanted now to look at your international students who are enrolled at US higher education institutions. And they amount for about 1/3 of the science and engineering doctoral degrees out there. They account for half or more of the doctoral degrees, and they're specifically in engineering, mathematics, computer sciences, and economics. And the top 3, you're looking at China, India, and South Korea in particular. Now, these students, the recipients with these temporary visas, and they're ranging from 64 and 74 and 71% when you look at 2003 and 2017, they're staying within the United States 5 years after obtaining that particular degree. The United States remains one of the largest destinations in the world at 19% in 2016, although we're beginning to see a decline, and that is prior to COVID. And then you're definitely seeing that within COVID for a number of different reasons, right? So other popular destinations are the UK, Australia, France, Germany, as well as Russia. And I would put into that Canada as well as one of these destination locations for higher education degrees or higher education study. I want now to take a look at the workforce. We see better labor market outcomes as expected from individuals that have a science and engineering or technological experience, right? Women and certain racial and ethnic groups, and looking in particular at Blacks, Hispanics, American Indians, as well as Alaskan Natives, are underrepresented in S&E. However, the numbers overall are indeed increasing. Women in 2017 accounted for 29% of the employment for science and engineering, compared to 26% in 2003. So we're seeing the number growing, and that's evident in a number of our programs, nuclear engineering programs in particular. When we look to the left and to the right, or in some of the classes, we're seeing more female representation in graduate school. In 2017, women accounted for nearly a half or more of the workforce in the life sciences, also in psychology and social sciences. But when you look at the numbers in your science and engineering in particular, and they pulled out some of this data, right? 27% in computer and mathematical science, 16% can be classified as engineers, and then 29% of the physical sciences. So when we look at underrepresented groups, as I indicated before, the various categories, you're looking at 901,000 workers, and that's up, right, significantly. The portion of individuals from these groups that are taking science and engineering jobs went up as well. 9% in 2003 to 13% in 2017. Now, URMs also vary in their presence across the various areas within S&E, accounting for anywhere from 10% to 22% of the workforce, depending on the category, right? And that particular report that I'm pulling some of these high points from talk about the share of Hispanics among psychologists, political scientists, post-secondary teachers, computer science, etc. And then they're also talking about Black individuals and where you will find a majority, right? So you're looking at computer science, computer systems and that analysts. Whoa, computer systems analysts. You're also looking at computer support specialists and network and computer systems administrators. For the foreign workers, right, then that's ranging from individuals from long-term US residents with roots in the United States to those that are recent immigrants. That grouping accounts for 30% of the science and engineering occupations. The number and the proportion of the S&E workforce that are foreign born, those are increasing, right? So more than half of the doctoral earners in science, as well as computer science and mathematics, are foreign born. And this is in comparison to approximately 18% of the overall population, and then 17% of the college graduate population in the US being foreign born. So bearing in mind a commitment to education and overall US demographic shift, and then also current geopolitics, we see a growth in Hispanic school-age students. We also see this among the Asian population, as well as other non-Hispanic populations. We are then seeing a decline in the K-12 space, and yet an increase in the college space for Black student population, and then an overall decline in white non-Hispanic, whether you're looking at the K-12 space or the college space. Putting this in the larger context, right, there is a shift that is occurring within the United States when you look at the demographic breakdown. So what does this have to do, or what kind of impact does this have when we look at nuclear engineering enrollments and graduations, right? So WISE puts out a report every year. We're waiting for the fall 2019, unless it's in my inbox and I haven't looked at it yet. But from 2018, looking at from 2016 to 2018, Looking specifically at graduate juniors and seniors, we saw a decrease by about 13%. Right now we're at about 1680. And then the number of bachelors in nuclear engineering should remain approximately 600 in 2019. I know at our institution, the enrollment for this past fall in the middle of COVID has remained steady. From 2016 to 2018, the graduate enrollment saw an increase, right? So it's sitting at 1775 or so, plus or minus. So approximately 9%. There has been some uneven advancement from levels 20 years ago. And the idea prior to COVID was that we were going to see it remain pretty steady and even off. With COVID, we are seeing less of our international students coming in addition to some other deferrals by our American students as well. To a certain extent, they're seemingly deferring as opposed to saying that they're not going to show up. So in my opinion, your American population will remain steady over a short period of time, long period of time. We'll have to see with the international population in this environment, health-wise and then and politically. So saying all of that, do we have a leaky pipeline? And although I don't like using the word pipeline, because I do think it's more of an ecosystem, yes, we do, right? So when we look at, and this is the latest set of data coming out of this indicators grouping, looking at that pipeline. So I'm really excited to see when they do update this, but we see this amongst our recruitment, engagement professionals as well, right? And we're talking about this at the college level and how then can we have a positive impact. So when you look at your ninth graders that started in 2001, there were 4 million of them. And then 4 years later, you had 2.8 million of them graduating, and about 1.9 that went on to 2 or 4 year colleges. But only 1.3 of them were actually ready for college work. What we are finding also is that students that are going on to community college and then to university, their outcomes, their performance, their success is outpacing individuals that come from high school, right? And you have fewer than 300,000 that are majoring in your STEM fields, and only about 167,000 expected to be graduates by the time you look at the time process that is necessary for graduation. So in way of percentages, you're looking at 70% that are finishing high school, 23% that are majoring in STEM disciplines, and then you have 55% that become STEM grads. Now, there's some interesting literature that is increasing, and kind of leading the charge is David Miller from Northwestern University and some of the research work that he has been doing, that we tend to devalue students who want to use their technical training to make important societal contributions elsewhere outside of STEM. And it's an interesting balance that we need to have. We're looking for the science and engineering trained individuals to do the technical work, in addition to understanding that some are not going to go down that particular route, but the value that they bring to societal as a whole is important. So I recall one of our students as an example, and completed the undergraduate, completed the master's, and then decided that she wanted to teach math and science, right, at high school level, and was grappling with that decision. And I remember in the conversation with her, you have to be content and happy and there is a role for you to play in that environment, right? If we don't have our scientists and engineers in these spaces, how then can we cultivate the next generation, subsequent generations, and have an impact on the curriculum in the pre-college space? And now that I'm talking about it, I haven't reached out to her recently to ask how things are. So I will do that shortly. So I put all of this in a complex theory or the systems approach to STEM and just STEM. And just to remind you, strategic enrollment management, we're looking at admissions. If you build it, they'll come. And we've moved on to enrollment management, and we're somewhere between that SEM in way of strategic enrollment management and the alignment as well. And it's very much about making sure that the needs of the institution overlap, and I say overlap as opposed to match, with what the student is wanting to get out of this type of training, right? This exposure to the material. So there's some properties of a complex system, right? A complex system is greater than the sum of its parts. Some actions will in the complex systems are dampened while others are amplified. And then that these systems are particularly sensitive to initial conditions that produce a long-term momentum. And they exhibit emergence or behavior that results from interactions between the various elements. And if any of my faculty members, I'm thinking of my training, realized that I reduced it down to one slide, I would be in so much trouble. But these are some of the elements. So the idea is to move from this traditional thinking that is linear, although at times we say it's not linear, but we can see that line, right? To work in a more messy environment of systems thinking. And I always like this particular cartoon, right? I need a rock this size, but pulling that rock out, there are other unintended consequences of that particular action. And sometimes we do this by trial and error. And then other times, we're trying to be more mindful of what that does, right? So with all that has been happening recently in the United States, kind of triggered the latest trigger by George Floyd, there is this recommitment to having more Black students, underrepresented individuals come into the science and engineering space, into the nuclear space. And the engagement and how that engagement happens needs to be thought about in a systems approach, right? In that particular umbrella. It can be seen by that community as a brain drain, that this student goes on to do this particular type of study and will never return to community. It also can be seen as that particular student studying nuclear engineering, and then there is a economic impact to community, right? And it is that discussion with the stakeholders, and the stakeholders are not just that student and immediate family in making that decision. And I'm just using that as one of the examples of how we have to be very mindful of our recruitment and retention of a student and that impact. And whether that impact coming from the viewpoint of that student will make a decision to stop and use the skill sets in another industry, right? That then ties that person back to community more soundly, or if that then has another type of impact, right? known and unknown. And I'm just throwing that out as an example of, as we look at diversity, equity, and inclusion issues, that systems approach is necessary. It's all about relationship building and the management of that build. So it's not about doing it once and it being sustained, but there is some nurturing of that relationship, right? And as I said before, it's about the stakeholders as much as about the student, right? I don't think you can separate the two. It's also about what goes on in the classroom. And you all know this, right? So it's very much about what goes on in the classroom, but it's also more than just the classroom. And what does that look like? And it's co-curricular, it's also personal and professional development. That you're looking at the environment, right? That ecology of graduate education, or education as a whole. And we always hear about these various learning styles, or more specifically, CIA, which is career identity advocacy, where it's merging together to make sure that interest, identity, and a sense of belonging is happening. And my opinion, if you don't have all of these and more, it's not going to be as effective as it should. And then how do we engage? Must and has changed, right? So we think about life before COVID and life during, and then we're imagining what it will look like post-COVID. I know on the outreach and recruitment of students, as we are in the midst of COVID, it has had its pluses in the sense of being able to impact or reach more students. So I think about the summer series that we did at NC State nuclear engineering program. Normally we'll have students come in, a 3-week residential program. They live in the dorms, and we take them through lectures, labs, small group projects. And that couldn't happen this past summer. So how do we quickly pivot to reach students in a meaningful manner? And we were able to do that using the technology, Zoom technology, right? But you still wanted to have the more tactile, the more interactive component to it, because it can very much be about talking to individuals as opposed to engaging individuals. And we did that through use of other technologies, right? So you're bringing the project online. You have to then be careful in the sense of not everybody has the measuring materials at home, or safe radioactive sources at home, but can you use everyday household items to get the concept across, right? And then also to have the student or students still get a glimpse into the environment. And we were able to do that with our reactor tours. And we tried not to make them as polished as they potentially could be. And I say that to mean where you're in the console room, and you're going to the Bay Area, and we're walking down the stairs, and we are not cutting that walk, but we're actually zooming across the area to show the entire environment. And then trying to do that at the graduate level as well, right? So you have these prospective students who are looking at comparing and contrasting different departments. How then do you have them have a look into what we have to offer? So you participate in the career fairs, you hold your own open houses, and then you think about how are your various subgroups, right, around research, the various research focus, have their own online experience. And that's what we're in the midst of creating. It's also how we engage must and has changed in way of diversity issues, right? And how then do you interact? And I'm of the belief, and I've done this all my career within nuclear engineering, is that we need to go. We need to not have an ask, but more of how can we help, right? And understanding the dynamics before the ask. And sometimes you don't even have to have the ask, that just comes because you're in that space. And it's in being in that space and not necessarily being seen or eventually not being seen as, oh, you're just looking to increase your numbers, or you're just looking to get the best and brightest and take them from within the community, right? So you are then, and then in the type of work that I do, I've got all these relationships that are just there, right? And are being cultivated on a regular basis in a different manner. So when individuals say, well, you know, I'd like to do a program and invite a particular community, that's already been done, right? Because I'm part of a community and I'm part of the university community as well. And then you're looking at the essence and the relevance of nuclear engineering changing or has changed. Students come to the area for a number, to the discipline for a number of different reasons. And we need, as administrators, need to understand why a student is attracted to this field and what they want to get out of it. And for the grad students on the call, you know, sit and think about what type of relationship that just feels good and you excel in, right? And that is the essence of what you want to study within nuclear engineering and its relevance to your ambitions, your goals upon completion of the degree. So I can't say it enough. It's about being authentic. It's about having your advocates and advocating for yourself as well, and allyship, right? Our field, this field, is a smaller one, say, compared to when you look at mechanical or electrical, or at least that's how it is presented, right? We're fortunate, I think, we are fortunate enough that we're going to keep on running into each other as we do our work. And how cool is that, that we're building on our experiences in academia to satisfy those goals. So it's really about that ecosystem of you, right? There's certain pieces of the puzzle, both personal and professional. And in some instances, the literature talks about not being able to differentiate between the two. We still do, to make a point, right? That it's very much about how your personal development is going with the professional development that is going on at the same time, right? And if those don't overlap nicely, we're going to have a bit of friction. And in some instances, it's just not going to work out the way it's supposed to. And it's also about the ecosystem of us, right? So it's not a us, you, them, or us, them, but it is an us overall. And I think that's where that alignment, or the strategic enrollment management and the movement into an alignment comes in. As the institution, the departments start to look or to ingrain further, asking questions of graduate students, right? And ascertaining from the beginning, well, what do you want to get out of this relationship? And this is what I have to offer. And having those discussions on a regular basis so that then there are readjustments that are made for the betterment of the discipline and of the persons that are within the discipline. So this is my last slide, I promise. So it's all about teamwork. And I know when you say that, people, it's like, yeah. But it is. And it's a systems approach to what we do, right? For academic success. And I was sitting thinking about this, and I thought, well, I can say what it is or what I think it is, but what are the students thinking, right? So I went out with just a quick prompt to a few of our graduate students, master's and PhD, international and national, male and female, right? To get a sense of why this is important, this way of thinking, this way of doing, right? And in my position at NC State, I consider myself quite fortunate. I was hired back in 2001 as a director of outreach, and no real roadmap, excepting for Paul Torinsky as department head and Mohammed Borham as undergraduate administrator, and Mansung Yim as graduate DGP, right? And they wanting to continue some of the work that they had started, but realizing they needed an extra set of hands and someone who was out and about, so to speak. And it has grown over the years, right? To now where I'm teaching, I'm doing more curricular activities. And this is done as a team, right? I'm calling upon the American Nuclear Society student chapter, Women in Nuclear student chapter, faculty members, other staff members. There's no way I could do this on my own. And then that has expanded to include the industry as a whole, right? ANS National, Women in Nuclear, National, Young Generation Nuclear, and the list just keeps on going on and on. And this is what some of them had to say. My eyes were open to nuclear engineering when Lisa presented at my high school. This was one of the first in-class presentations that I did. I think I was a week into the position. And then when I got to the school, that chemistry teacher said, oh, I called an assembly. We're going to the auditorium. But somewhere in there were two students in particular. I reached out to one of them who then continued to say, now I have my PhD in the field. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for her talk and her guidance along the way. Lisa helped me decide my direction in undergraduate, helped compare career paths when I was joining the industry, was my first point of contact when applying to graduate school, and an invaluable resource through my doctoral degree. It's not an understatement to say I would not be here without her. And there are many other individuals on that team. And I remember responding to him and going, oh, you're overstating. And we had a longer conversation, and it revealed some things that I didn't know, that I thought I was just talking it through. And those were crucial points that he remembered, right? And then helped me to remember too, but not understanding the deeper impact that it had, right? And I was going on and on, so I'm sure you've read the other comments here. So I'm gonna leave those up if you haven't finished reading them, or if you wanted to read them, and then now open it up for any questions that you may have. This is definitely a work in progress, and I can't say enough. You think you figured out what stone you're going to take to put into the larger puzzle, and then you're seeing the avalanche, right? So you're constantly adjusting and readjusting accordingly. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Uh, I'm sure the audience has seen what a special person you are. You know, there's no one else near like you in our nuclear engineering community. You're just so highly regarded. And NC State's lucky to have you, as I'm sure they're well aware. We'll go ahead and open up the seminar for questions. Does anybody have any questions? I learned a few things. I had no idea that over 50% of the workers in engineering and computer science were foreign born.
Yes.
That I would have never guessed that the majority of our, and you know, but we don't see that in other areas. Do you think that's because, you know, those foreign born workers have to get a visa or have to get, you know, a green card, and that the United States has a policy or feels that those individuals will, you know, be very productive in the United States, and that's why they offer them, you know, green cards and citizenship? Do you think that's, or do you think part of it could be that maybe our engineering and computer science, you know, graduate programs are very strong, so a lot of those students come here and then they get here and they love it here and they want to stay here? Maybe it's a combination of both. I'd like to hear from you what you think the reason is, because I was just so surprised.
It's a combination, right? And as you said, and then also the various companies, right, looking for a workforce. And it is, in some instances, just as easy to get someone an H-1B visa, or if they were educated in Europe or in Canada, to get that specific type of visa for them to join the workforce almost immediately. So in general, you hear from a number of companies that they just don't have enough American students to fill the positions that are open. And then there is this not so nice aspect of it. You can get away with paying less, right, for a foreign individual, born individual in some of these positions. So that also is playing into it as well. It's a complex mix that when you look at the numbers, especially for computer science. Now they are hurting with COVID and not having a number of the US embassies open to get visas for studying here. So it'll be interesting to see how they use remote learning to still attract and keep some of those students until one can get the visa and the borders are open again and we have this COVID under control.
So here's a question in chat. It says, you mentioned the importance of arts being integrated into the technical and scientific training, more tradition to STEM pursuits. Can you elaborate a bit on this?
Sure.
So the importance of arts in the STEM field.
So within the last, I would say, 10 years or so, it's still not as prevalent. The idea about STEAM, right? So we've always heard about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And what the literature is saying and what your College of Education professionals are saying is that by taking out that humanities, social science component, we are not teaching to the full student. So it is integral to how we do engineering, to have that design, to have that understanding of communication, of presentation, right? Integrated in. And to some students, doing your science and math is just not enough, right? They need to have that artistic component integrated into their studies. And in my opinion, that gives you a more well-rounded engineering professional, because that person comes out with an understanding of how to communicate the science, communicate the technology itself. in a language that is not jargon filled. So I consider myself to be in that sweet spot in some regard. So I can read your, say, nuclear technology article, and sometimes I'll go, okay, the essence of this is such and such. Why didn't they just say it that way, right?
Yeah.
But when I sit and chat with someone who is thinking about going on to graduate school, and to talk about the kind of your nuclear challenges and some of the cutting edge research work and link it back to everyday. And they get excited, or at least they're then saying, I see how I fit, my whole self, how that fits into my discipline, my future discipline, one I'm considering.
And I think we see that, you know, all the companies that we work with, they always say, we want people who communicate better. You need to focus on communications. And they're looking at a well-rounded person that can work well in teams.
Exactly.
I'm going to jump to the next question, and then Robbie, I'm going to come back to you. But Dr. Hayward said, what steps do you and NC State take to recruit and work with a diverse set of students? Do you plan to make changes in the coming years to increase your applicant pool for your undergrad and grad programs? Then he says, how do you keep your students aware of relevant external fellowship opportunities and any or less support positions for international students? Do you identify something specific for those students? So I guess it's, how are you, are you looking at new ways to diversify? And then what other opportunities do you have for international students?
We're always looking because you can get settled, right? Thinking, oh, this is the pipeline, and I just have to nurse that pipeline. And that's why I constantly am looking at the statistics out there, and then doing my own kind of informal polls and speaking with the College of Engineering level, just so that they can see trends across all of the disciplines a little bit better than I can. And then being involved in the on the ground. I think that is crucial. And I know at times, I'm sure my department head would love for me to, okay, yeah, pass that on to somebody else to do. But the fact that I'm on the ground helps me to understand the bigger picture overall. In way of increasing the applicant pool, it's sending out more tentacles and developing more relationships, right? So we're constantly looking at what our demographics look like, and they're as skewed as anyone else, right? Some years we have more females, and they work themselves through the program, they graduate, and then when you look at your next year that's coming up behind them, it's not as diverse as it was before, and you're going, what happened? And then realizing that in some instances, individuals being the trailblazer doesn't work. So just as coming into the work environment where you're keeping the group together, you're hiring en masse as opposed to individually. So then it becomes a cohort that moves forward, right? And trying to do this both at the undergraduate and the graduate level, so that then they're not the only, right? And then also enough mentorship programs, or not even mentorship, just opportunities, not necessarily within nuclear engineering alone, but sometimes you have to increase it to the College of Engineering, so that then there are certain challenges, there are certain celebrations that can happen for particular groups across the college as a whole, and to make those opportunities available, right? And then with regards to fellowships, we have at the undergraduate level, I work with the scholarships, and then at the graduate level, we have another professional that is there to help identify fellowships and to work to make sure that the packages that one puts forth, you don't disqualify yourself. And then we have another professional who's working with me on the international fellowships, and just kind of as they come out and making sure you're on the list so that you have to be looking for them always, but when they do, they're coming to you, right? It's like, oh, a new scholarship, new fellowship. how,
Yeah.
send me students so that we can give them this money, right? And these experiences. So working on that level as well. And then, did I answer all of that question? I think I
I
did.
think so. There is a little add-on that came in chat that said, you know, some of these international students have more difficult times getting jobs because of citizenship. Do you guys do anything special for that? Or have any hints,
Um,
successes?
yeah, it means then that faculty members are, and administrators are aware that, I think that for me, right, there's a responsibility. If we're going to recruit international students, we need to give them some opportunities. Whether it's within the department, which sometimes are easier than linking them to national laboratories or to companies. But then sometimes you just need to pick up the phone and call someone and explain the area that they are specializing in and see if something can be done, whether it is through the faculty advisor or at a particular national lab. And then having students realize that there are some areas that will always be sensitive, and if you study in that area, know that you are not going to get an additional opportunity ahead of you. It's not going to happen, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that a student should not, and this goes for everyone, right? Experience is experience, right? It may not be in your area, but it's experience, and that you should take advantage of that. And
Okay.
I keep
Robbie, I know you have a question, but Robbie's been waiting longer, so I'm going to let Robbie go next.
Thank you. What I was wondering is, you talked at the beginning about these demographic shifts with increasing numbers of women and underrepresented minorities and such. I guess my question is, are you seeing at NC State specifically, and maybe just broad, nationally speaking, that there's any kind of regional difference? Are trends at NC State different than trends at Wisconsin or Berkeley, or as kind of the local flavor?
Yes, most definitely. And I wanted to put that in, and then I said, okay, this is not a class in, this is a seminar. So I didn't add that component, but most definitely, you have to look at the demographics that are in your state, in your particular region where the university is, and what kind of resources you have to attract and retain those students, and then even go beyond, right? So most definitely, it's different for NC State looking at, or UTK looking at the Southeast compared to the Midwest, right? So I also like, and I like how things are going, the direction in which we're going. We're engaging with minority serving institutions. And it's not a catch-all. We want to capture all categories, but realizing what schools are in my region to build a meaningful relationship with. And then from there may be some best practices that we could utilize to expand it even further. Keeping in mind that I do not want to be in competition with a minority serving institution for recruiting of students, right? There is a reason why a student will go to an MSI versus a predominantly white institution, and they're legitimate, right? Along the way, either for a graduate degree or in particular a doctoral degree, in some instances, they will have to leave a minority serving institution. And are we equipped to have them integrate into our institution and thrive? And how I deal with that is that you have your relationship, you're building, there's a program that we started with South Carolina State University, and we have their senior class. Some of them will go to Wisconsin, that program had started before us, and then another set will come to us, right? And when you speak to the students, they tell you, it's like, North Carolina State is similar to South Carolina State. The weather is the same. I'm not too far from home. And therefore, yeah, I want to go to this particular program over going to Wisconsin, which has some weather challenges, right? It's not to say that it can't be done, but then you're looking at how do you make sure that the environment in which you're trying to attract an underrepresented minority into is not culturally jarring, right? And it makes sense for some of those students. Some of the students go to Wisconsin, it's like, I just want to get out of South Carolina. I want to go as far away as possible from the Southeast. And they do, and they thrive, right? And then there are other students, it's like, boy, I'm glad that we have this option for North Carolina State. I'm not quite sure if I would have liked the experience, because if you have too many things that are for adjustment, it takes away from the study.
Okay, Lisa, time for one more question. Dr. Maldonado.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
I think I remember meeting you when you invited me to visit while I was working at GE in Wilmington many, many years ago. And the sad thing about that is that I am now bald and gray, but you look exactly the same.
I do not. I've looked at my past. There has been change.
So question for you is, do you still do that program? I thought that was fantastic, where you would bring former graduates of the program. You know, I remember being with Cecil Parks and giving presentations to the students and encouraging them to go to graduate school and such.
Yes, we do. And I'm thinking of expanding it a little bit more into, and I don't sleep, I don't think, because thoughts will come to me and they always come late at night. I'm thinking of a First Friday seminar where you are then inviting, it's just a combination of industry as well as alumni to come in and talk. And it's an informal chat, right? It's not a seminar per se, but we get together, maybe a 3 minutes. You have each of you to say something that you think that you have to get out. And then you get peppered with questions as a way of having that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought that program was fantastic. And Wes, just for your information, this is almost 20 years ago, and they would basically cover the costs for the visitors and even get us tickets to the games and that kind of thing. So I was impressed on the investment that NC State was putting forward.
I should do it this year because it's really cheap to Zoom. Hey,
there are seats at the Neyland Stadium.
Well, they have a TV now. It's all televised. And UT is really looking forward to the basketball season at this point in our season.
Aren't there no seasons now?
After that last game, people are like, when does basketball start?
Oh, yeah, it's
Yeah. Anyway, Lisa, thank you so much for spending time with us today. Always hearing from you, and it's always a delight to see your face. So you have a great day, and thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ivan, for the initial invite.
Bye-bye.